Hello and welcome to the Gaggle. I'm Peter Lavelle. On this edition of the program, we're going to talk about the China angle in this election from the perspective of both parties, as if there is any kind of difference. Because one of the things that is important about this topic here is that we've had years of Russiagate with no substance whatsoever, and and now making the claim that China and Iran may be involved here. But of course, the Russians are always the supremo there in meddling, which has never been proven. But China's influence in American politics is overwhelming in so many different ways. And then nobody really wants to talk about it, as if they're kind of embarrassed because it's so obvious here. To discuss this, we have Lionel, he needs no introduction, and we have George Szamuely. He's an author and a writer and a founder of this YouTube channel. Lionel, China may be meddling. Well, I know who's colluding and who's been colluding for decades. And it has been the captains of industry that have been doing this. I cringe every time I hear that Bush and Obama and they sent jobs overseas, over to China. Well, they didn't send one job anywhere. It was industry that sent jobs. They're the ones that shuttered factories and fired workers. Okay, I mean, you can pin a lot of things on government, but not this one here. Okay, but it's because it's such a bipartisan grift, I would say, is that it's uncomfortable to talk about. Though the influence peddling that China is involved in is pervasive. They got deep pockets, and there are plenty of people that will sell out their country for money. Okay, the Russians don't peddle money like that. I've lived here for a long time. That's not their style. Okay, not their style. Lionel, why the difference? Because there is a lot of influence, and we can define what influence means in what ways, but it's there. Go ahead.
Just as a cultural analyst and observer, since I can remember, the Russian archetype in cartoons from Boris and Natasha, I will destroy you, Drago. The KGB always sinister. There's never a moment of, there's never any kind of TV show where there's Boris, the lovable neighbor. It is so inherent. It's almost in our DNA. So anyway, so as this Russian collusion came, and the most tenuous, he had a Russian name. Okay, fine. Put that over there. Now, for better or for worse, here comes China. And instead of being Russophobic, all of a sudden people are saying, you are Sinophobic. Don't call it the Wuhan flu. Don't make any connection to China. That is racist. How dare you? And this super sensitive, hypersensitivity. And I just asked a question, but I'm not saying Beijing released COVID, but I can make at least an academic case for the origin, for the genesis. Where was this hyper-punctilious concern over the sensibilities of Russia over anything? We have a 16, 17, 20 named list of imaginary Russians. I think they were just generated by some computer program, and they were basically just excoriated as being this vile, intrinsic, systemic, anti-American. But yet, how if you even remotely refer to China, you're going after the culture. So my first question to you, gentlemen, is that why? Do they have a better lobby? I mean, is this not evidence of something?
No, I think there's a really interesting and straightforward answer, is that they're shareholders. They're part of this. Look, I mean, I can't remember the name of the film because of lockdown. I, like a lot of people, spend a lot of time on Netflix, okay? But there was a film, a B-rated film, and it had a very strong overtones of Chinese characters were superior. They were the good guys. I mean, obviously, in my opinion, Beijing paid for that film, okay, because it's soft power, okay. But the issue is that Hollywood changes scripts to make people happy in Hollywood because they're so. I mean, China's a huge market, as that's been said for ever since China opened up. But it's the racism element is brought in there as though being Russophobic isn't racist. I mean, what was it, Georgia? Was it Clapper that said the Russians are genetically inclined to lie and to be deceptive?
That's exactly the thing, that in fact, it is permissible to say almost anything about Russians and Slavs in general. Because, if you go back to the 1990s and remember the kind of things that were being said about the Serbs, and that it was somehow inherent in their character, that there's something inherent in that Slavic character. There was self-pity, viciousness, savagery, and so on. So this is a kind of an absolutely permissible racism when it comes to Russians and Slavs. I mean, there was a columnist in the New York Times who recently wrote about, Trump has this partiality for Slavs, presumably because he has two Slavic wives. One was Czech and the other Slovene. But apparently you can just make this derogatory remark and no one thinks anything more of it. But I think that the simple answer to Lionel is money. I mean, the Chinese dispense a lot of money. A lot of politicians have got very rich through Chinese money. A lot of people in Washington have got very rich through Chinese money. Lobbyists have got very rich through Chinese money. And Russians just don't throw that kind of money around. So same kind of
and George,
you're not attacking the Russians.
And on top of it, I mean, there's just the economic and financial connections between the two countries are so limited. They're very, very limited. Okay, with the Chinese-American relationship, oh my goodness, how can we count the ways? Go ahead, Lionel.
But I want to go back again to this, because you're right. But if I were to hypothetically discuss this with, as our friend Mr. Carlson calls him, Don Lemon, and if I said, you, as an African-American man who are rather sensitive, for good reasons, as to pernicious, systemic, kind of a crypto-racist referencing as to inclinations, how can you, as a human being imbued with such an ability to ferret out this unfairness, how can you think nothing at all about being Russophobic? I know perhaps you might say, well, they're Caucasian. I don't even think they get into this Margaret Mead kind of race distinction, but the hypocrisy. And when also, I have no faith in humankind whatsoever. People will automatically pick up a fad, to wit, neck tattoos and face art that overnight took an entire culture for. People will do anything to fit in. They will say anything, do anything. Hate. If there's one thing history has taught us, you can hate a group of people overnight and say, I don't even know. Tutsis, Hutus, people who are basically identical to you. The hypocrisy of this. And let me also say something unequivocal. Since we first talked about this, so I should go blind, as we say in Hell's Kitchen. I should go blind if I'm lying. I have waited for one person to tell me, here is how Russia colluded. This is a guy, Vladimir Boom, whatever his name is, Boris, whatever. He broke into this computer, switched the numbers. I'd say, thank you. That's collusion. But not sowing discord. And I'm thinking, that's what I do. I sow discord. I've been doing it my whole life. And yet nobody is scientifically attuned enough to say, there's no evidence of the diagnosis. We have a disease without a symptom.
Yeah, but don't you think also?
Incredible.
But don't you think also, George, to be Russophobic, there's no downside. You're never going to be criticized, and if you're wrong, you're going to be wrong. So what? You have another chance to be wrong. You always have another chance to be wrong. But in the case of China, everybody is very, very careful. They parse their words and all of that. Maybe you're working for a media company that is partially owned by a Chinese company that has a relationship with the Chinese state. I mean, you do all those kind of things in your head, don't you? You kind of step back and think, maybe I should say nothing. Well, when it comes to Russia, well, I mean, we don't need to repeat here. It could be a waste of time. I mean, the worst possible things you could ever say about a group of people or a country is said on a very regular basis with almost no pushback whatsoever. And that's the kind of world we live in. And you know what? That's a world of cowards. Okay, when you know you can write the most outrageous story, and even if it's not true, who cares? Okay, you wouldn't do that with China, would you?
Right. No, that's it. And for instance, this use of this word Slav, which you see more and more in the media, it's amazing the lack of self-awareness on the part of these media types when they use it. It's like, well, who is famous, let me think, for denouncing the Slavs as subhuman, as really as lowlifes, as people who deserve to be subjugated? Well, let me think.
Yeah, hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, but again, as you say, there's no downsides because nobody really regards that as racist. Well, because they're white, but that doesn't mean anything. After all, the Nazis were friends with many people who were non-white. I mean, Nazis were aligned with the Japanese who were non-white. The Nazis were aligned with Arabs who were non-white. The issue that it only has to be white to qualify as somehow Nazi or pro-Nazi, that just simply isn't true. So this is a kind of a bigotry that is acceptable within this liberal culture, and it's about self-awareness of it.
But that's just amazing. George just hit the nail on the head. Acceptable bigotry. That's what it is. It's acceptable bigotry.
It's funny how you mentioned the word white, and again, just as an observer, I am amazed by how many people categorize themselves as being of color. I guess I'm beige, I'm without color, I'm sans color. And they say, well, as a person of color, say, you are? What do you mean? Okay, fine. Well, aren't the Russians? No, they're white. Wait a minute, how come they're not of color? The rules don't apply. Very, 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 very quickly. Whenever you can also throw in a Middle Eastern kick to this. How many times have you heard, well, what do you expect from Fox? Who's the owner? Who are the shareholders? Some sheikh or whatever. It's this selective, I decide the rules as I go. Look, if you want to be bigoted, let's do it. Just don't be bigoted in your bigotry. Apply the bigoted, be equanimity, or be fair with your bigotry. Spread it around. Look, all I know is it goes back to what I've been saying. You will never go broke underestimating the ignorance, whatever, but the stupidity and how we work as flocks in schools. We just find ourselves saying things for reasons I will never know. There are people who still say that absolutely positively Russia was involved in it, and they have yet to tell me why. And they say it, and after a while, where does this come from? If you say something long enough, perception becomes reality. You know, I'm sorry.
Well, I remember Russia invaded Ukraine, and I did this on Crosstalk, and I had a guest that said that, and I said, let me back up here just for you. So you just said Russia invaded Ukraine. When did that happen? And blank.
Right.
Okay, well, give me the month. You don't have to give me the day, give me the month, okay? Blank. The season? What part of the year? Blank.
But that's the same thing with Russiagate. Every single ingredient of Russiagate has been refuted. You know, the stuff in the Steele dossier, the stuff in the the WikiLeaks. Was the GRU passed on the emails to WikiLeaks? That's gone. The Trump Tower meeting, that's gone. The Flynn Kislyak conversation, that's gone. But it doesn't really matter. It just lives on as something that you just keep repeating, and then people just accept it. You just beat them over the head.
What is it? Showtime has the Comey thing coming out this week or something like that. Oh my God! I saw the trailer. I couldn't believe it. I'll finish it up.
Speaking of this, the man who shot Liberty Valance. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. All of this is we create the narrative, the yarn. We create the fabric of truth as we go on. I mean, it is just incredible. And that's when RT and Farah and everything came about, all of a sudden people said, are you telling me there's foreign interference? I said, you mean like BBC? No, that doesn't count. That's by definition. They go, what do you mean? You said foreign. I don't mean foreign. That's our foreign. And they were parsing our foreign. I mean, it goes to show you, they will create exceptions to the imaginary rules they've created.
Yeah, and then when you do that and you do it well, you get a job at CNN and MSNBC. All right, gentlemen, we'll finish up on that. I want to thank Lionel and George. I want to thank our viewers for watching us here on The Gaggle. And remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.